Welcome, fellow citizens. Larry Platt here from the Philadelphia Citizen with our guest, the legendary political media consultant, Neil Oxman. Um, you've heard of Neil Oxman if you pay attention to politics the way I do. He was the messaging consultant behind Ed Rendell, Michael Nutter, candidates across the country in congressional and gubernatorial races, even a Midwest mayor named Jerry Springer at one point, which maybe we could talk about. But this cycle, Neil is sitting out, and I thought it would be a great opportunity, since he doesn't have a dog in this fight, to pick his brain about where we are heading into the political elections, the midterms. So, and I should also say he's a tremendous Renaissance man, a professional golf tour caddy, and a movie enthusiast. I always look forward to his annual star turn on Radio Times with Marty Moskowitz, which is just before the Academy Awards, and get his because I think you see about 300 movies a year in theaters.
Well, since COVID, I've been down to about half of that, but I was averaging over 200 movies a year. When I had no life years ago, my record was 2 years in a row. I saw 276 and 282. Which is now I see a movie sort of every third day. And the interesting thing is, Larry, when I go to the movies, there are no more than a handful of people in the movies. It's really sad. I mean, I saw this really nice film at the Ritz the other night called Operation Mincemeat, a good World War II movie about a true story about trying to fake the Germans out, about where the Allies were going to land after they left Africa. And it was in the biggest screen at the Ritz, and I was there with 3 people. I mean, it's just really sad. But anyway,
what is it about, before we get to politics, what is it about, is there something magical in the experience of being in a movie theater with a big screen? Is that why you're?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think new movies are something that's better enjoyed communally. I mean, when you hear people laugh, or actually, hear people cry or gasp or whatever it is, depending on the movie, I think it's clearly more interesting and better, first of all, by seeing it in those dimensions, because that's the way movies are shot. They're shot, with certain lenses and lighting a certain way to be seen there, not on, your iPhone. And, it's fun to have some popcorn or some Raisinets or whatever you're going to have, and enjoy a movie. And I used to do it because I would walk from my office at 16th and Locust to the Ritz to clear my head after a day and of working. And I would go to a movie, and then we would edit all night. Literally, I would go back to the to places where we edited. But I'd have 2 hours where I'd sort of kill between the time we'd start editing and the end of the workday. And I did that forever just to kind of clear my head. But, I'll see probably 150 movies this year. I mean, the problem is there's less product coming out. Art house movies might be dead. I mean, big screen movies are, the big blockbuster stuff people are going to. Kids movies are making lots of money worldwide. But the little art house movies, which were always vanity projects, as Mark Moskowitz says, for directors and actors and producers, and always found a way, if you looked at Box Office Mojo, to make $1 million or $2 million and break even. They're making $50,000 and $100,000. No one is going. Yeah. So on a Saturday night, if you would go to if you would be in the lobby at the Ritz at 4:00, there'd be sort of 100 shrivels like me, older people there. And then at 7, it would be a mixed crowd. And at 9:30, there'd be a lot of young people. You go to the lobby at the Ritz now at 4 or 7 or 9:30, and there are 10 people in the lobby. I mean, it's really, really sad. And I'm not exaggerating. I write in my movie diary how many times I've been alone in the movie theater. And about 1 out of 4 movies I've seen so far this year, I've probably seen 40 this year, I've been completely alone.
Keep that
It's
for a second.
insane.
You keep a movie diary?
Yeah, well, that's how I don't do descriptions, but I do the name of the movie. This started out as a movie contest years ago. And for those of us who were in the contest, we never trusted each other. So we had to put the ticket stubs in a diary. And so the diaries are like that thick with all the big ticket, because of the ticket stubs. And it was the name of the movie theater, rating it from 1 to 10, and whom you saw the movie with. Now I have just a little diary where I just have the name of the movie and I rate it from 1 to 10, so that at the end of the year, when I do Marty's show, it's always a top 10 show. And I can remember, oh, I gave this movie a 10 and this movie a 5. I'm an easy grader.
This is why I love you. Your passion for, and by the way, I am very concerned about the loss of communal space. That's a hidden cost of COVID right now. And whether it's restaurants, whether it's, cities are about different coming together. And we're not doing that to the degree that we used to.
Right. The 3 big things that have happened, and I've said this to all my friends for 2 years now, obviously, office space stuff is going to change forever. Boomers have retired way sooner than they thought they would, my generation. And thirdly, movie going. I mean, after 2 years of watching everything on Netflix or Hulu, or this new paradigm, which I don't understand, where they open stuff at the same time, it just means people don't do it anymore. Yes, when a kid's movie opens, for instance, or a Marvel movie opens, Doctor Strange did $345 million worldwide last weekend. I mean, movies like that still make money because certain audiences want to go. But for people our age, we stopped going to the movies. We really, we just sit at home, and it's less expensive. And this is the true reflection of what's going on at the Ritz at the Art House. On Mondays and Tuesdays, all day, the Ritz is selling movie tickets for everybody for $7.
Wow,
that's a big difference.
Yeah,
because tickets there are $11.50, and but for all day on Monday and Tuesdays are $7, and there's still, no one's still going, even for really good, well-reviewed movies.
Yeah, it's fascinating and fascinating from a trend standpoint. So
I thought we should talk about the campaigns
about politics, right? This is the way it always is with us, because you're such a curious guy. You taught me. I've learned a lot from you over the years about politics. You have a phrase that I think of all the time when I'm observing and writing about politics. It's about the winner of a political campaign does 3 things, and it's about definition. Can you tell me what that?
Well, what I've said, and I started saying this when I did some lectures at Oxford in the 80s, and I kind of, thought about what we had done for a living. When we get hired, when the campaign group gets hired, and I'm really, near the end of doing this after 750 campaigns. I always say 750 campaigns and 550 PGA Tour events, and I wish the numbers were reversed. But a campaign is a good campaign if you could do 3 things. You try to define yourself. You try to talk about yourself before the other person talks about you. You try to define your opponent. You try to talk about the other person before they define themselves. And the third thing is you try to define the stakes of the election. You try to make the election about something that's a home game for you. Now, sometimes you can't do all 3 because A, you don't have the budget, or B, it's not one of those years that, if you're a Democrat running in the Contract with America year in 1994, you couldn't do anything. If you're a Republican running in 1992, it's the economy stupid year. There's nothing you can do. I mean, there are certain seminal years in America where it's hard to define the stakes of the election. Famously, in a couple of campaigns we did that people might remember, in 2002, when Rendell ran in the Democratic primary against Bob Casey for governor, now Senator Casey, Bob the younger, we made the campaign a referendum on experience. Every spot we did talked about Rendell's experience. And so that when Casey attacked us, we talked about the fact that he had no experience. At the beginning of that campaign, we asked Democratic primary voters, the two main candidates for governor, Ed Rendell and Bob Casey, who was the most experienced to be governor. Because Casey was well known statewide, he was beating Ed 2-1.
Right.
By the end of the primary, we were beating him 4.5-1. It was unbelievable. We made the campaign about experience. When Michael Nutter ran for mayor in 2007, we made the campaign a referendum on who would be least like John Street. And, you know, and Nutter literally came from last place with 7 weeks to go. And you were editor of Philadelphia Magazine then, and Philly Mag endorsed Michael. I remember us having a conversation about it. He said to me, can he possibly win? And I don't do flack stuff, as you know. I don't call and, you know, I answer questions, but I don't do that. That's not kind of what I do. And, you know, for one of only 2 times actually ever, you called me and somebody, I guess Chris Satula from the Inquirer editorial board called me and said, we're thinking about endorsing Nutter, but can he really win? And I explained the whole process of what we had done, that we had essentially gone from last to first place, making the campaign a referendum on who would be least like John Street, where everybody else was talking about crime or drugs or the education or the other stuff in the city. And Nutter ended up getting almost 40% in a 5-way race. But
and Neil, that doesn't just come from your gut. Those decisions are research, right?
Well, for instance, in the Nutter campaign in the summer of 2006, almost a year before the primary, we took a poll and we asked voters, as you may know, John Street is term limited for mayor. Do you think Philadelphia's next mayor, quote, should continue the policies of John Street or move the city in a different direction? And the number for continuing the policies of John Street was 25 and moving the city in a different direction was 66. We did that again in January of 2007, and the numbers were 77-17. By a +60 margin, people wanted to move the city in a different direction. We were the last people on TV. Every day that went by, and I saw Dwight Evans and Shaka Fatah and Tom Knox be on television, and they weren't talking about that. I couldn't believe it. And when we got on TV, and we made the campaign literally as if we were running against Street.
I remember saying, what the hell are they doing? I remember
the geniuses who eat lunch every day at the Palm were, what's Oxman doing? He's crazy. What's the campaign doing? And we actually, we were 7 points. We were dead last in the polls. And in 2 weeks, we went into second place. We went from 7 to the 20s. And then we put on Nutter's daughter and we, you know, it sort of sealed the deal because it made Nutter look like a human being. But we made the campaign a referendum. It's actually what we did for Rendell when he, you know, Rendell lost to Wilson Good in 87. And when he ran again in 91, people forget that Ed he had lost 2 primary campaigns. He was nowhere.
Right.
And we weren't doing well in the polls. And David Cohen was managing Ed's campaign. And Ambassador Cohen. I want to call David Ambassador Cohen. Anyway, you know, I said to David, we're going to talk about what, you know, we're going to make this a referendum on what Ed said back in 87. And we did. And, you know, and we ended up winning that primary fairly handily when 6 months before the primary, Ed was really in bad shape. The secret, of course, of that was Mark Moskowitz, my producer, used all this footage from 87 when Ed was skinny because he had gained all this weight in 91. So all his spots in 91 made him look skinny, even though he's about 30 pounds heavier.
That's hilarious.
Actually said publicly.
That's hilarious. Well, let's take your calculus of defining yourself, defining the opponent, and defining the stakes, and apply it to this campaign, to the first to the senatorial primary, because I was not impressed. I watched the debate. I wrote about this. I watched the debate, and Fetterman was horrible in the debate. But I do feel like you cannot define John Fetterman. He is so when I apply your calculus, I feel like that's why he's apparently headed for a landslide. Is that
Yeah, you know, I mean, here's a guy, think about this, Larry. The guy was mayor of
Braddock?
Braddock. I was going to say Brockton. He's Mayor Braddock. Population 2,180. A tiny little borough, smaller than Narberth, half the size of the borough of Narberth.
That's amazing.
In Allegheny County. He, from there, has the guts to run in a Democratic primary in 2016 for the United States Senate with the endorsed candidate Katie McGinney and Joe Sestak, who had won the Democratic nomination in 2010 for Senate, beating Arlen Specter, who switched and only lost to Toomey by 2 points. And he gets in and he gets 23% of the vote. But he took the progressive lane. He made himself the progressive in that race. And he started to define himself statewide as this bigger than life, interesting figure. A, because of the way he looks, B, because of the way he dresses, and C, because of the way he talks. Then he never stops running. He takes on an unpopular lieutenant governor in Mike Stack, who would be, you know, just had a horrible term as lieutenant governor. I mean, how do you have a horrible term as lieutenant governor? You know, it's impossible. No one knows who lieutenant governors are, except for Catherine Baker Knoll, who used to introduce Ed Rendell, who's Ed's middle initial is G. She always mistakenly, or because I think it was, she always, when she introduced Edward G. Rendell, she always called him Edward G. Robinson. You know, but you know, he just keeps on running, and he gets, you know, he wins the nomination, and of course he becomes lieutenant governor. And as lieutenant governor, it's not like he gets tons of press. He doesn't overshadow Wolf, but he moves around the state talking about marijuana reform and you know, the other stuff he does. There's only one thing you do as lieutenant governor besides preside over the Senate, which is to head the board of pardons, the board of prisons. And, you know, he does that, but he continues to define himself over a period of 6 years, from the time he gets in the race in 16 to now, as this interesting progressive who's different than everybody, who wears shorts and a hoodie and all this other stuff. And so when the Democratic primary voter has moved much further left than they did even 10 years ago, I mean, they're way out to the left now. And because you look at all the primaries that people have won, you know, both locally and statewide, Democratic primaries have moved to the left. You know, Fetterman has that lane. On top of it, you have Conor Lamb, who's, you know, a great guy who everybody likes and is a terrific guy, and runs and has a terrific CV and runs in really tough districts and really tough years and wins tough races. But he's from the Pittsburgh media market and no one knows him here. And it takes an awful lot of money to break through. And he's not been able to break through. And Malcolm Kenyatta is just sort of still a minor guy because he hasn't been able to advertise on TV, which is going to allow Fetterman to win probably by, I mean, but certainly, as you said, by a landslide. He's going to get more, you know, four people are on the ballot. He's going to end up with more than 50% of the vote in a four-way.
Why did all of the sort of smart establishment political people line up with, just about all of them line up with Conor Lamb, though? You had Jim Kenney, you had the City Democratic Party, Brady,
well,
had Brian Boyer. Like,
because I think that because they're very uncomfortable with, first of all, you know, I mean, there was an article today in the Inquirer where Fetterman doesn't even have much relationship with most of the state senators and state house people that he literally serves with, that he's there with every single day. You know, you walk on the floor of the state senate, there are only 20 Democratic state senators there. I mean, they should be your best friends. You can talk about the Steelers and the Eagles. You can talk about the Phillies and you can talk about anything. You don't have to talk about something that makes people uncomfortable. He's evidently Tommy McDonald, who used to work in my office and now works for the Wynn Company, which is the New York political consulting firm started by Bill Hires, who actually managed Nutter's primary campaign here. says that Fetterman is kind of shy, that underneath he's kind of shy. And I don't think that he has reached out and has the relationships that, that lots of other, quote, pals have. And Conor Lamb decided, well, I'm going to reach out to these people. Not that they can, at the top of the ticket, Larry, as you know, no one can deliver anything for anybody. I mean, does city committee mean something at the lower end of the ticket for judges? Absolutely, judges' races and stuff like that. But at the top end of the ticket, when millions of dollars are spent on TV, when there are articles written in the newspapers all the time, when stuff is online, when there are debates, it's really hard if a Democratic committee person on election day says, hi, Mrs. Jones, I'm Larry Platt, I'm your committee person in the 5th Ward, 8th Division. Here's our sample ballot. Can you make sure you vote for Conor Lamb today? Mrs. Jones is going to look at you like you have 3 heads. Now, at the lower end of the ticket, for when there are 24 people running for 8 common pleas court judgeships, and you have no idea what's going on, that sample ballot might mean something to you if you have a relationship with your committee person. But at the top end of the ticket, it means nothing. Now, I want to finish one thing. We've done a couple of unsuccessful United States Senate races in Pennsylvania. Most famously, Lynn Yackel, who lost by 2 points to Specter, and Sestak, who lost by 2 points to Toomey. Both of whom did not reach out to the establishment and the labor community and everybody like they should have. And Fetterman is doing it his way. Larry, he has no finance committee.
Wow.
He's raising only money online. So the usual suspects of the Jarens and the Kesslers and all these people who raise Democratic, he has no finance committee. He doesn't have those relationships. Now, that's not to say he's not going to win, because, but, there's nothing wrong with getting everybody in the boat with you rowing at the same time. So, raising extra money from a finance committee, getting all the pals on board, they're the same as making sure that the women group are on board and the environmentalists are on board and the pro-choice people are on board and the labor people are on board. I mean, in this, with the turnout models the way they are in Pennsylvania, where in 2020, and 2018, there was a surge of Trump people, and it certainly happened in 2021 in both New Jersey and Virginia, where there were surges of Trump people, even though Democratic, Murphy got more votes in 2021 for governor for his reelection than he did in 2017. But he only won by 3 points instead of the landslide he won. And that's what's happened in Pennsylvania. We lost all except one, our statewide judges in 2021. And I think Fetterman, it's not to say that he's not going to all of a sudden be a hack because Bob Brady and all these guys are for him. But one of the reasons that Lynn Yackel lost and one of the reasons that Joe Sestak lost is because the establishment was less than enthusiastic about their candidacies. I remember that this is a true story. Bob Barnett, who was a cabinet member for Rendell and one of our best friends who passed away years ago, he and I went to see Lynn Yackel a few weeks after the primary. And we said to her, Lynn, politics, which is what I believe, politics is about personal relationships. It's just about making friends. I mean, you can, and everybody who's involved in politics, from a committee person to a ward leader to a county chair or a state rep, they all have egos. Every committee person has an ego. You go out and run for a committee person to get 10 names on a ballot, which is what you need to qualify for the ballot, and knock on doors to get 84 people to vote for you in a Democratic primary. You still have an ego to do that. You have to be nice to these people. And I remember the county chairman of Erie County, which is not that small a county, and Erie is the smallest media market in the state, but it's still a real place. The weekend before the election, he called me. Because the Friday before the election, you go do all 6 media markets. He said, well, I met your gal again. I said, yeah. He goes, do you know this is the 7th time I've met her? I said, yeah. He goes, she still doesn't remember my name.
Oh, God.
And, so what I think Fetterman has to do is, I think he's got to, he was not good in the debates. The Inquirer did not endorse him. I mean, there are, I think he's got to pick his game up so that at the defining moments of the campaign, he is a little bit better. If he, it's interesting, the Republican primary is, I think, even more interesting to talk about than the Democratic primary.
Yeah, let's get to that.
But this guy, McCormick, who has unlimited amounts of money and unlimited amounts of soft money, is going to be really, really a tough candidate. He's run a really great primary. I don't know who's going to win among Barnett, who's coming on like gangbusters, and the Club for Growth. Right. Here's a woman who runs in Montgomery County for Congress 2 years ago, gets killed, loses by 20 some points to Madeline Dean. Of course, then she says the election was stolen from her. Right. And now, with no money until just literally 48 hours ago, is just in the mix against McCormick and Oz, who both spent a ton of hard money on their campaigns, and soft money's been spent on their behalves. And she's dead in the mix in the polls. So I can't figure out who's going to win. But if McCormick wins his primary, he's going to be really, really tough because he's run a great primary election. Oz, it'll be a little easier for Fetterman to beat because McCormick's done a great job of defining Oz as not as conservative. And I'm not sure the Republican electorate here will be as excited to vote for Oz as they would for McCormick or Barnett. But, if I were Fetterman, I'd look at myself and go, okay, there's certain things, I'm not going to be the establishment guy, but I want everybody helping me, and I don't know if anybody on that campaign, it's just a bunch of kids working on a campaign. I mean, Fetterman famously doesn't like consultants, doesn't want to talk to anybody. He does this on his own. But when you look at, think about this, Larry, since 1962, when Joe Clark won re-election, other than Casey or one unexpired term of John Hines with Harris Wofford, we have lost every United States Senate race in Pennsylvania. Democrats lost every seat in Pennsylvania. And we've run a whole bunch of people who, for one reason or another, were flawed. They were not the greatest candidates, whether it was Bob Edgar or Lynn or Joe Vignola running against John Hines. I mean, for whatever the reason is, we don't win those races. And, Fetterman has to look at it and go, okay, what's the deal here?
Well, let me ask you about Kathy Barnett, because I wondered if, when I saw her surge with no money, I wondered if maybe what we're learning is that television advertising doesn't matter like it used to. And I know that has been your bailiwick for the last.
No. Listen, one of the lectures I do now is I do, one of my presidential lectures is, I've said that in presidential campaigns, the last ad that mattered was the Swift boat ad against John Kerry in 2004. I don't think TV ads matter in all of those. When Republican primary voters who are in this state largely everywhere, largely pro-Trump, have gone, get their messages. They do get messages from TV, which is why McCormick's come from nowhere. I mean, McCormick lives in Connecticut or Manhattan, wherever the heck he lives. Yes, he has a connection to Pennsylvania, in that was born and raised here. But like this woman, Carla Sands, they haven't lived here for 30 years. Right. I mean, yes, it's Oz went to Penn. That's great. I'm glad. Born and raised in Wilmington. He was a Phillies fan. I'm happy for you. But he no more lived in Pennsylvania than, than Bernie Sanders. But so it's made McCormick somebody. But Republican primary voters look at some websites. They get messages from Twitter. There's that secret society that they get stuff from, and I don't mean QAnon, I'm talking about anything nuts. They get stuff from these groups of people where they talk to each other. And, and she, by the way, at the couple of Republican primary debates, she's been terrific.
Yeah.
She's been very, very good. And I think part of it is where people are sick of Oz and McCormick yelling at each other. some of it's falling off on her. In other words, if you don't like McCormick, and you're dropping from him, your vote isn't necessarily going to Oz, and vice versa. The question is, who's everybody's second choice? And she's become more and more a second choice person, where if people are pausing for one of the other two because they're doing nothing but killing each other in TV ads, she's been the beneficiary of that. Now, I don't know in the end if she's going to win. My betting is still on McCormick, but who knows?
It's fascinating. By the way, I saw that, switching over to the gubernatorial race, I thought of you because Josh Shapiro runs an ad trying to interfere.
We did that with Sam Katz, the one Republican I work for, and Saul Shore, who's Josh's media consultant, who lives here, who's very smart, not because we did it, but it's a very, very smart thing to do, because
and let's explain. Let's be clear about what did they do, and what did you do in what was
in 1999, the one Republican I voted for Republicans in the past. It's, even though I'm a Democratic consultant, I've not voted straight Democratic every time in my entire life. I worked for Sam Katz's mayoral campaign. Sam Katz ran for mayor in '99. He also he ran a couple other times, but the race which he almost won in '99, I did his campaign. And the Democratic primary was Marty Weinberg and John Street and a whole bunch of other people. I think it was a 6-way primary. And we realized that the easiest person, the best matchup we had, was to run against John Street, because Street was the most controversial. And so I did primary spots beating the heck out of Marty Weinberg in the last 10 days of the campaign, making sure he didn't win, and sort of laying the groundwork to make it easier for Street to win the Democratic primary, which he did. And Katz only lost by 9,445 votes, where 1 year later, Al Gore won the city by 325,000. So it was the right thing to do. And we've done that before. We, around the country, we have sort of done that, where that wasn't the first time we did it. The campaign group have done that in other campaigns. You guys just knew about it here. But what Saul Shore did for the Shapiro campaign was he did a spot that looks like to a conservative Republican primary voter. It says all these wonderful things about Mastriano. He's pro-life and an election denier and all this other stuff. The only time you realize that this is not a good ad is this what Pennsylvania wants? But it's a perfect ad for him, who's not spent a lot of money on TV, because by everybody's account, he'll be the easiest person for Shapiro to beat, which he will. He is so far out of the mainstream, and so kooky. And so, obviously, you have to give him credit for being in the service for all those years. And he taught at the Army War College in Carlisle, and, got a PhD, and is evidently a real student of war tactics. But as a candidate, he's been just off the charts, crazy.
And attended the insurrection. Says
right. And has gone to rallies where Q people have spoken and all this other stuff. And what happened is that the Republican establishment, what's left of it, and there's not a lot of left of it in Pennsylvania as there was 20 and 30 and 40 years ago, except for Santorum and then Toomey, when you think about the history of post-World War II Republicans in Pennsylvania, John Hines and Ray Schaefer and Bill Scranton and Dick Thornburg, moderates. They were, and Dick Schweiker, they were all moderates. Right. As we would describe, they wouldn't win, and Arlen Specter, they wouldn't win Republican primaries today. The first real evidence of it was in 2004, when Toomey ran against Specter in the Republican primary for the Senate and almost beat him, only lost 51-49. I played golf that summer with Shane and Specter right after that. And I said to him, your dad should become a Democrat now. No, because if he had done that in 2004, no one would have run against Specter in 2010. He would have been the Democratic nominee and probably won the general election. But anyway, and there'd be a Democratic seat. But the, you know, what and the Republican candidates for lieutenant governor are even more nutsy than you know, this guy Mastriano. And so the bad thing is for Democrats now is that Wolf gave away, you know, there's no straight lever anymore, which only hurts our party. You know, in the old days, as I always say, you could click the lever on the old machines. Now you push the button on the computer machines, which meant that you could, you know, the entire ticket. In 2020, one of the reasons Joe Torcello lost was because we didn't have a straight ticket. And right above him, Nina Ahmad was losing for auditor general by 425,000 votes. And so many people were on the Republican side of the column. You know, they went from Biden to Shapiro to Nina Ahmad, to Ahmad's opponent, and not enough of them came back for Joe Torcello, and he lost by 50,000 votes. So for us, you know, we need a gigantic gubernatorial win so that people stay in the Democratic column. But this guy Mastriano could really hurt not only you know, by losing himself, but the congressional candidates below him and some state house and state senate candidates. You know, I don't know. I don't think he's the person. But anyway, the Republican establishment, Andy Riley and these other folks have gotten together. So they've gotten Jake Corman, you know, who's getting single digits, who's whatever he is, Senate minority leader or minority whip or whatever, or majority leader or majority whip, to say, don't vote for me, vote for Barletta, former Congressman Lou Barletta, mayor of Wilkes-Barre. The problem is that Corman's still on the ballot. And so his lever isn't locked. So he's going to get whatever percent of the vote he's going to get. And I don't know if he has enough votes or if enough people will know to translate that, you know, to vote for somebody else. I assume, you know, Mastriano is going to win. And unless it's such a weird turnout model, Larry, where Republicans vote in such large numbers and we don't participate, you know, I think Josh will be the heavy favorite to win the governorship.
So you and I are both philosophically, I think, if I remember correctly, disciples of Bobby Kennedy's 1968 presidential.
Absolutely. Campaign. Yeah, it's the first time I worked in campaigns. I stuffed envelope.
And I grew up reading about that campaign. And this phrase has stuck with me. One of the descriptions of the campaign was that Kennedy represented I love this phrase, a liberalism without elitism and a populism without racism. And it feels to me like the Democratic Party has gotten so far away from that. Like it has become a party of elites. And that's why I'm intrigued by the Fetterman candidacy, because I think it is close to, am I on target here? Do you feel
absolutely like no. Everything that people hear, everything that blue collar voters, former Democrats, Reagan Democrats, people who work with their hands, or new collar workers hear from Washington, from the Democratic Party, turns them off. Whether it's from AOC or Nancy Pelosi or Chuck Schumer or the gerontocracy that's become the Democratic Party has become the Mormon church. We're a gerontocracy. I mean, everybody's got to go away. With all due respect to Bernie and Elizabeth Warren, who say they want to run for president again, and Hillary, who wants to run for president again, everybody go away, retire, and let the new generation, come take over. But some of the things that AOC says are great, but the arrogance and the elitism of the AOCs of the world, and we're going to take statues of Lincoln down in Madison, Wisconsin, and we're going to rename schools in San Francisco from Lincoln. Are you serious? The guy didn't do enough. I mean, and look what happened in San Francisco, where they threw out the school board. They voted out the school board members who wanted to do that. But the way that Washington talks to former Democrats, to the Democrats who live in Bucks County, okay, because Hillary only won Bucks County by 3,000 votes, where she won Delaware County by 30,000 votes. It's unbelievable, or more. She won it by 50,000. The way that, you know, and Hillary lost Northeast wards where Obama won all 69 wards in the city. It's unbelievable. Hillary lost wards, you know, lost the 20, you know, Biden lost the 26th ward, Ron Donnie Tucci's ward in South Philly. We don't talk to working class people like we used to.
And by the way, that includes Black working class people.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, this is not this is my argument on Larry Krasner, right? Which is that 562 murders, those are mostly Black and brown bodies.
Right.
Who is protecting?
Larry Krasner's a buffoon. He's an absolute, and listen, I can't, you know, I know the head of one of the divisions there in the DA's office, and, you know, the office continues to be in disarray. You know, dozens and dozens of people have quit. I mean, it's like that guy just became the new DA of Manhattan, you know, puts out a statement, we're not going to prosecute these people. It's insane. I mean, you know, people should not be in jail for an ounce of marijuana. Of course, none of that's, you know, and people who've been wrongly convicted, you absolutely should have a unit to get these people out. But, you know, you know, the victims of violence are, you know, it's young African-American men killing young African-American. It's fratricide. If this were happening in Lower Merion, the National Guard would be on every corner in Lower Merion, literally. And Krasner, you know, I mean, Krasner's finally started to get the mess. If somebody real, Larry, had run against, you know, with a real campaign, one-on-one, had run against Krasner in the Democratic primary last year, they could have beaten him.
That's right.
You know,
and to your, you know, you're the genius message guy. It seems to me the message should have been, I'm the true progressive, right? To sort of co-opt progressivism against someone who claims to be a progressive, but who under his tenure, progressive constituencies are suffering.
Right. You know, it's why for years when Rendell was mayor, we were always doing polls every quarter. And the number one, you know, there are two services in the city that people love more than anything else. The fire department, because how can you be angry with people who run into fires, and the library. And then there's a gigantic gap to the next level down, which is why when Nutter came in and these idiots who were around him closed the libraries. I mean, I couldn't believe that it happened, because I don't talk to many of these guys afterwards. I just do campaigns. But David Cohen was smart enough to say, let's keep polling and seeing where the world is. But, you know, like, for instance, I was going to say, the people who want choice, you know, everybody, all the public school teachers and the unions and stuff are all against choice. African-American families want choice more than anybody else in the city of Philadelphia. The parochial schools in Philadelphia, which used to be gigantic, half the parochial school enrollment are non-Catholics. They're African-Americans who want to send their kids to a place they feel safer and they can get a better education in Philadelphia public schools. And Larry Krasner's not, you know, I mean, yes, I mean, it's his numbers among, if you had a young, bright, tough African-American assistant DA or assistant US attorney who'd prosecuted people, but who was, quote, a liberal, they could have beaten Larry Krasner. But, you know, you had some guy run against him who ran a horrible campaign and still got, you know, close to 40% of the vote.
Yeah. You said something interesting, that you don't talk to these guys after you get them elected. And I wonder if I wish you had, because I feel like after many candidates, not all, and I think Ed was a genius at messaging, but their messaging goes down a level after they're elected as opposed to during a campaign. There's more.
Well, then they have the real job of having to do the job. I mean, it's why in the end I don't think Helen Gim is going to run for mayor. I mean, she's a wonderful gadfly, and the city needs somebody like that. And she's terrific, but I'm not sure she wants to work, make sure the trash is picked up, or something that Jimmy Kenney and city council should have done last summer. I don't care who you are, have your staff get on the phone and call individuals and say, do you want to be a lifeguard? So they could have opened up all the pools. I mean, it's unconscionable, and it's a hard job to do that stuff. And it's so, I mean, I don't do, as I always say, I don't do government. It's not my job to insinuate myself in government. I can tell people when you take polls how you're doing or not doing. And we're always been involved more in congressional stuff because congressmen run every 2 years. So there, you're polling much more frequently. For mayors or senators or governors, when people run every 4 years, there are gaps in when you're polling. And so, people go off on their own and they make mistakes. And in the first year of the Nutter administration, he made this gigantic mistake of closing libraries. And I famously have said to people, when Ed became mayor, David said to me, Ed and David said, you want anything, quote, you want to be on a board or commission. And they got 1,500 resumes for boards and commissions, none for the library, zero. And I went on the board of the library and sat next to Chaim Potok, and started doing polling and showed Ed and David, this is why you fund the libraries, because the libraries are more than places that, they're after school places and all this other stuff. And it's one of the great institutions in the city. The Nutter people didn't get that.
I want to ask you two other questions before we close. And this has been great. I always learn so much from you. You've given a sense of it here. You for as long as I've known you, which is 20, 30 years almost, you have a sense of outrage, of moral outrage about the insiderness of Philadelphia, even though you're in the establishment, but you have always tried to push me to mitigate against Philadelphia parochialism and insiderism. Can you speak about that?
Well, I mean, I always said to you that Philadelphia is run for 250 people. I don't know if you remember me saying that, but yes. Satullo quoted it once.
Scream at me.
But it's true. And so when why wasn't the stadium built where it should have been, the baseball stadium? Because FUMA wanted to stop it on Spring Garden Street. I mean, there are a million things, why wasn't the waterfront in Philadelphia like Baltimore's waterfront, which is a gigantic destination thing, which millions of people come to every year, and because, when you think about it goes, I mean, Republicans ran the city, historically for over 100 years until the early 50s, when Clark and Dilworth and these Reform Democrats took over. And then, you had the years of Tate and Rizzo, and more, sort of more old time Democrats kind of took over. And those people have stayed entrenched in all these little places, the Board of City Trusts, the Parking Authority, the Housing Authority, the Redevelopment Authority. And these little interest groups have, I think, stopped great progress in the city. And the city has been run for, literally the interest of a relatively few hundred people, not all of whom have the best interest in the city at heart. And, some of whom, like Fumo and Purcell, went to jail. For Purcell to have taken away the parking authority from the city and made it a state thing. And so it's become a Republican patronage haven, with Marty O'Rourke, telling you I have no comment because it's under litigation. Is he, the guy who did all the direct mail for Purcell, and Purcell ended up going to jail. And the school system doesn't get nearly as much money from the parking authority as we should, because they just, the parking authority is literally nothing other than a patronage haven for Republican committee people and Republican ward leaders and their wives and their families. That's what the city is still about. I mean, the, Kenny doesn't know if he's fish or fowl. He just doesn't know, am I still some FUMO staff guy, or am I going to, am I going to do the right thing like he did in the first year and a half or 2 years when he was mayor, and he did something that no mayor I've seen done, including Ed. He used his political capital and dropped in the polls significantly for a period of time because he forced the soda tax on, got city council to do the soda tax thing, and wham, now you have $55 million for pre-K. It was wonderful, I mean, but we need, this city still is, Larry, it's a bifurcated city we have the highest percentage of people living in poverty. We have of any major American city, we have the highest percentage of people living in abject poverty.
Right.
And, and the rest of us are living in these little enclaves in Chestnut Hill or the far Northeast or Center City, which is expanding. I mean, when you think of the Center City now, it goes from Lower Kensington to, down to way into South Philly. So you have Liz Fiedler as a state rep, which is unbelievable down there, to below Washington Avenue to Brewery Town. And then West Philly, where, it's pushed out in my old neighborhood in Southwest Philly, where the 46th ward is completely turned around, and it's even moving into the 51st ward anyway. But, we have to, all the old people have to get thrown out. And, these new people have to take over, who are these anti-establishment types, to get the right things done.
Last question, and we only have a couple minutes left. But of the
and dinosaurs like me, which is why all I care about is caddying on the golf tour and go to the movies.
Yeah, dinosaurs like us, actually. So I agree with you. That's why we sort of champion new blood all the time at the Citizen, and the staff
pushes. Right, and you guys do a great job of it. You and Billy Penn, who shows the mayor's schedule every day.
Right.
Nothing public on the mayor's schedule today.
Right. Let me ask you this. Last question. I only have a couple minutes left. Who of the prospective candidates can be that, for mayor, can be that change agent? Do you see something there? Do you see something that you saw in Ed or in Nutter?
I mean, I don't know enough about them personally. I mean, I think Jeff Brown is going to probably try to be that person, the guy who owns some of these supermarkets. Dom is more of a business guy. I mean, there's going to be through the Chamber of Commerce and some of these other groups, I think they're going to want to try to get a lot of people in city council who are more chamber oriented. They might be for Dom. I don't know, I don't know who else is really in the end going to run, who from city council. Think about this, Larry. For the last 24 years, since Ed, all the mayors have come from city council. 8 years of Street, 8 years of Nutter, and now what'll be 8 years of Kenny. So will it come from city council? I mean, if Helen Gim decided to run a Democratic primary, I think she would clearly be the favorite. I think she's been scared a little bit. I don't think she really wants to do the job, but Rebecca Reinhardt is, there's somebody that I think could, now we used to work for her. JJ Balaban in our office did her campaign in a re-election. I don't know if he's going to do her mayor's race or not, because JJ, good for him, is going to another place since we don't really exist too much anymore. But, Rebecca Reinhardt, I think, would be great at that. I think she could be, but in the last time a city controller became mayor was in, who had been somebody who would be city controller be mayor was like in the early 1950s. It's been 70 years since you've had a city, and a bunch of city controllers have won. Alex Hempel, Tommy Leonard, a bunch of city controllers run and never, no one knows who the city controller is. I mean, so, it's
when Joe Clark was city controller, his investigations led to 6 suicides. And I always say, now that's political reform.
Yes. I mean, so it's, I think all these people are well-meaning. I mean, I don't know in the end whether this, Councilman Green is going to run, or Derek Green, or, Terrell Parker, I mean, how many people are from town? Because in the end, they have to give up $130,000 a year part-time job. Hey, let me have one of those.
Yeah, right.
And which is why I'm absolutely unequivocally for term limits for city council. I mean, if you serve in, Darrell Clark wants a 20-year council term. What are you crazy? There's, as somebody said about him, the most overrated guy in Philadelphia, Darrell Clark. I mean, talk about, a cipher. But if you're term limited after 12 years on city council, your lifetime pension based upon council salary now will be over $40,000 a year, and you'll have health benefits for the rest of your life.
Wow.
We need, so it's a hard job. It's whoever it is, it's a hard job. The job is, and I don't, Jimmy has really disappointed me in the last few years. He should be we talked about this before. He should be in your face every day fighting for this city, and he's not. He tells people all the time that he hates being mayor. He said it. I've heard 50 people tell me that, that he said to them he hates being mayor. And if you hate being mayor, resign. Just go resign and let somebody else come in who wants to do it 24 hours. It's a job like Rendell did it. You do it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and when it's over, you go exhausted to a beach and you have a nervous breakdown afterwards. But just to get the pools open and to pick the trash up and make the schools functional, and there are 400 people. There are 400 corrections officers that we have to hire, 300 police officers that we have to hire. I mean, it's unbelievable, the dysfunction of city government with a multi-billion-dollar city government and a multi-billion-dollar school system, and it's dysfunctional. That's a hard job. So if Helen Gim doesn't want to do it, I don't know if she's going to run. I've met her once in my life. I don't know her from Adam.
I saw another a few weeks ago, and he pointed out that his last budget was $3.8 billion. This one is $5.6 billion.
It's unbelievable.
On that investment are taxpayers
getting? Right, exactly. And you can't keep, a 31% property tax assessment doesn't necessarily hurt me, but senior citizens who can't afford it, or young working families, it's really, really hard.
Well, listen,
for what services?
I think this starts the Ox for Mayor campaign. But
years ago, I remember, and I still say this, although I say it less so. Bill Green said famously that the worst legislative body in the free world is city council. I don't believe that anymore. The worst legislative body in the free world is the State House of Pennsylvania. Especially on the Republican side, that's the worst legislative body in the free world. But, do I wish there would be the new versions of Clark and Dilworth and 17 amazing people run for city council? A half a dozen who are there now, including, disparate views like Alan Dom and Jamie Gauthier. Both of whom should be there, and who I think are both terrific and responsible council people, and Derek Green and some others. To do what you have to do to turn the city around and get rid of Darrell Clark and these, talk about dinosaurs, get rid of silly people like him. He's not silly, just, I don't know what Darrell Clark stands for.
Well, that's exactly that. Look, this has been great. I hope you're open to continuing to check in like this, because I think you're a fount of both information and outrage, which is what we need.
Larry, I don't know about anything except caddying on the golf tour anymore. That's my only, Well, and I can give you, it's unbelievable. I can't remember campaigns I did 2 years ago, but I can remember pairings from the 1975 Greater Milwaukee Open, where I caddied for Mike Reeser. I can remember sprinkler heads right now. The sprinkler head where Watson hits it on the 11th hole at Augusta is 206 yards to the front of the green. The sprinkler head on number 7 at Pebble Beach is 96 yards to the front of the green. I know that stuff like that, but I walked by, I was with JJ and Doc coming back from lunch a couple of years ago, and somebody walked by us and said hello to me. He said, "Hi, Mr. Oxman." I said, "Hello." I said to JJ, "Who was that?" He was the press secretary in the Hufflecade. You know, nothing. I could have taken a lie detector test and not done that. But yes, I can remember sprinkler heads on golf courses where I'd caddy. Think about how trivial and trite my life has become.
Well, you are. It might be a small universe, but of the people I know, you're one of the smartest and most interesting. So,
Well, thanks, Larry.
thank you for doing this.
And the Citizen is a wonderful thing. It really is. I mean, the voice of all these kids I don't know. Keep bringing them in.
Yeah, well,
Let them
that's the
take
thing.
over.
That it's the most pure thing I've ever done, and so that's
Right.
why it's wonderful to wake up to it every day, because it's like I don't have to do any of the crap you used to have to do at other media outlets to get to the stuff you're passionate about. Thank you, dude.
All
You're
right.
the best.
Talk to you soon. Take care, Larry.